Okay, so we're going to start with the parable of the pearl merchant. And a modern day way of putting that would be a pearl trader. Now I think the Greek is closer to trader actually than merchant. It's a very short parable, and of course the smaller the parable, the bigger the message. So Jesus says again, the kingdom of heavens is like a trader seeking fine pearls. Finding one highly valued pearl, he went off and sold all the things he had and bought it. That's the parable. Trader seeking fine pearls, finding one high valued pearl, he went off and sold all the things he had and he bought it. Why did he do that? Because he wanted the best deal. He was seeking fine pearls, and he saw a pearl that was very high value in his estimation, so he bought it. He sold everything and he bought it. Alright, the pearl is a church, and the true Christian, the saint, not just a true Christian but a saint, needs to die with a water baptism in the true church, or not die at all with a water baptism in a true church. And very few saints get there in one step. The people in this church normally, they were Mormons, they were Jehovah's Witnesses, or they were nearly Jehovah's Witnesses, then they became Lord's Witnesses, or they were Jews, then they went Church of England, then they went Jehovah's Witness, then Lord's Witness. There's all sorts of routes, but there's very few who just come straight in one step. And if they had not been pearl traders or church swappers or bundle jumpers in the terminology of wheat and the weeds, you've got to be prepared to jump out of the bundle. If you really seek God, then you seek not the comfort of your existing church, but you seek the best church there is, that has the best understanding, that has the most, the pearl standing for the doctrine of the church, the wisdom of the church. This pearl, church wisdom of the highest value. He's seeking church wisdom, this guy. And he's a trader. And what this parable is all about is finding the true church is a multi-step journey. It is not a single-step journey. And you have to be looking, whatever church you're in, and I say that to people in the Lord's Witnesses, you find me a better church, I'll go and join it. And we all have to have that attitude, because we can all screw up and God can appoint somebody else. So if you're a true Christian and you want to find the true church, be a pearl trader, a church wisdom trader. Be prepared to sell everything you've got, all of your investment in your previous churches. There was one guy who said to me that he felt because he'd been in 3 churches and they all proved to be false, he was a big failure. And I said, absolutely not. Because you joined them, it was an act of faith. All you can do is join the best church that you can at a time, given your position. And he was a pearl trader. And there's no problem in joining a church that's a false church if you believe it to be a pearl of high value. It's an act of faith. And God will bless that act of faith and show you another church. God knows that there are plenty of people who can't just walk straight into the Lord's Witnesses and go, oh, I understand all your doctrine, where do I sign? I mean, believe me, there are very few people who can do that. There are some, but very few. There's a route which is easier, and he knows how far you can go, and he will put a church in front of you, which isn't necessarily true, but is a step of faith. You take it. He thinks, okay, this guy is prepared to act. That's good. Let's show him a church that's a little bit closer to it. And so it goes on. Meantime, Satan's trying to push you in the wrong direction. But be a pearl trader. Okay, John 10 and the parable of the sheepfold and the thief and the plunderer and the other sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, he that does not enter into the fold of the sheep through the door, but goes up some other way, that one is a thief and a plunderer. But he that enters through the door is shepherd of the sheep. The doorkeeper opens to this one, and the sheep listens to his voice, and he calls the owned specified sheep by name and leads them out of the fold. Doesn't say that, but when he's got all the specified ones out, he goes before them and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger, or one belonging to another, they will by no means follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of those belonging to another. Then it says Jesus spoke this comparison to them, but they didn't know what he was talking about, which is normally the case. And it doesn't just apply to the apostles back then, or the disciples, it applies of course to the disciples today. But now we do understand this, and let me attempt to explain it. Well, Jesus explains that he himself is the door, and he's the shepherd, which is quite a double act, because he must go through himself if he's the door and the shepherd goes through the door. So how does Jesus go through himself? In Jesus' explanation, he says, I am the door, whoever enters through me will be saved, and he will go in and out and find pasturage. So this is a spectacular door. You go through it, you will be saved. So this door is a sealing, because if you will be saved, you're sealed. And it's the door to the saints. So it's the ARC, it's his master covenant. And he goes in, the fine shepherd goes in through that door, because the fine shepherd is his flesh. I mean, he was the fine shepherd. He entered into the ARC with Jehovah anyway, to make that covenant. And other people go in through that door which he created actually. He created the door, he is the door. And he went in through that door, having made it, because he became a mediator of a sub-covenant of the ARC. The first new covenant is a sub-covenant of the angelic ransom covenant. So he went in to mediate the 1NC through the door he himself had created. Anyway, the door of the ARC, the angelic ransom covenant, is for the saints. So the fold of the sheep is for the saints. This is the saintly fold, because Jesus is the door for it with the ARC. So you have to be a saint to be in that covenant. And whoever goes through that door is a shepherd of the sheep. But then there's this further criterion. The doorkeeper, who was John the Baptist originally, opens to this one because he personally baptized Jesus. And the 12 apostles, who then Jesus then made their baptisms transitive, but they were already baptized by John. And the sheep, which is the 1NC saints, listens to his voice, which is the message of the shepherd, and he calls his sheep out. And that's what happened in FGS 1. In order to be the shepherd of the true church, the doorkeeper has to open to you. And the doorkeeper in the first true church was John the Baptist. So unless you were baptized by John the Baptist, unless he personally opened the door to you, and all John did was an intransitive baptism, so that means he baptized you, you could not run FGS 1. So Jesus could run it, all the apostles could run it, but I'm not sure that Epaphroditus, who was the 5th president, was baptized by John. And there were, I think, 3 discreet virgins and 2 foolish virgins running FGS 1. So that's where things could have gone wrong in the 1st century. But it's even more interesting in the Jehovah's Witnesses, because the John the Baptist for the Jehovah's Witnesses was Charles Russell. He was the 3rd Elijah. He was the doorkeeper. And unless Charles Russell opens the door to you, you're not the shepherd. And he did open the door to Rutherford, because Rutherford was baptized, I think it's 1906, 10 years before Russell died. And Russell accepted all baptisms up to the time of his death. I don't know whether Charles Russell baptized directly Rutherford, but it didn't matter because he had a policy of accepting all baptisms, so he opened the door to all baptisms whilst he was alive. But Russell certainly didn't open the door to anybody after he died. He should have, what he should have done had he understood this parable, and funny enough he gets a second chance with this, with the reappointed Laodicea. He should have opened the door, he should have picked his successor, which I think was Macmillan, but Macmillan didn't want it, and he should have opened the door to him, and he should have told him, I give you authority to open the door to the next guy. But of course, why would he do that? He thought that World War I was Armageddon. And who can blame him, having had the Gentile times end in 1914 and World War I break out? He didn't really see the point. I don't blame him at all. But the fact is that the only president other than Russell of the Watchtower who was authorised by God to be the president was Rutherford, nor was baptised in 1923. That was 7 years after Russell died in 1916 in October. So Nor did not have the door open to him by the doorkeeper, and therefore he was not eligible to be a shepherd of the sheep. I mean, he went in through the door, he was a saint, but the doorkeeper did not open to him. So he couldn't have been he shouldn't have been the president of the Watchtower. And what that means is he was not a discreet virgin, he was a foolish virgin. Even though he was a brilliant evangeliser and expanded that church from 150,000 to 3 million during his presidency, according to this parable, he should never have been the president. Well, then we have to consider the thief and the plunderer. Now, he doesn't go in through the door at all. So what that means is either he's not a saint, or he's a saint in the wrong covenant. So if you consider what happened with Laodicea, where somebody sent Roger Knight over to get our baptism, but Roger Knight never became the president of Laodicea. So whoever sent him, I didn't open the door to him, I opened the door to Roger Knight, who wasn't the president. And furthermore, in our understanding, the guy who is the president, or was the president of Laodicea, probably still is, was the first New Covenant saint, and you can't run a second New Covenant church as the first New Covenant saint. And neither can you renounce your 1NC position and say, well, I'm now the mediator of the 2NC. You cannot do that. It's a decision that isn't made by you. You don't propose to your husband, he proposes to you. So he went in through the wrong door. The interesting thing is, you see, the scripture says, but doesn't go in through the door, but goes up some other way, indicating there's more than one other way you could go up. And one other way is not to be a saint, and a further other way is to be a saint in the wrong covenant. And that one is a thief and a plunderer. So that's how you identify the president of a true church who's a thief and a plunderer. The doorkeeper doesn't open to him, and he doesn't go through the door. He's in the wrong covenant or not a saint, and he wasn't baptised by the Elijah. And I'm the Elijah, and I did not baptise the president of Laodicea, I baptised the Roger Knight. One thing the Watchtower did get right is the other sheep are unsanctified. It's not the great crowd, but it's all the unsanctified church members, the ones who aren't saints. Alright, that was a quick look at John 10. Look at Numbers 22 to 24, the account of Balaam and Balak. It's fascinating, the greater meaning of that, it really is. So, when you're interpreting an Old Testament account, the first thing you do is you look at the literal meaning of the names of the characters. So we start off with the sons of Israel pulled away and encamped on the desert plains of Moab. Now Moab means water father. Ab is father, and Mo is an approximation to water. So water father, in other words, Elijah figure. So the plains of Moab would be the desert plains of Moab actually, would be the sons of the 3EC of Russell, who was their water father, after they've lost their water baptism, because they're desert plains. And this was across the Jordan from Jericho. And Balak, which in Hebrew means empty or void, the son of Zippor, a small bird, got to see all Israel had done to the Amorites. And Balak is in fact the evil slave, empty of new ideas and research, and just representing itself, not representing Jehovah. And Moab became very frightened at the people, because there were many. And Moab began feeling a sickening dread of the sons of Israel. Now, the difficult thing about these accounts, God invented time. And time is causal today, and it's sequential. But there was a time when it wasn't, if that makes any sense. It wasn't causal before the Big Bang. And he often, in his accounts, jumps around in time. So even though in the order of this account it starts with him being scared of sons of Israel, that actually happens later in the fulfilment. It's when we become a big church. He's not scared of us now at all, because he only can look physically. So, and then Balak, the son of Zippor, I'm not quite sure what this small bird is. It sounds like a son of Asher, actually. Small bird, small in authority, not a 1NC, but an Asherite saint. Alright, so they get scared when knowledge of Laodicea is getting out at congregation level and when we're getting bigger. So what did he do? He sent messengers to Balaam, which is a combination of the Hebrew word for not and people. Not people, not a people. And that's a perfect name for Laodiceans, because they're neither one thing nor the other. They're not really Jehovah's Witnesses and they're not really Lord's Witnesses. They fall between two stools, basically. They're not sincere JWs, they're not sincere LWs, they're hidden LWs within the JWs. But they're not as bad as you might think. The son of Beor, meaning lamp, which I modestly put as me, at Pethor, the interpretation of dreams, which is Joseph or Daniel's job, which is where I am, interpreting dreams and scriptures, which is by the river of the land of the sons of his people. And so Balak says to Balaam, go on, can you please curse your own people? Curse Laodicea, please, because I'm getting a bit scared of them. Then we've got the older men of Moab and the older men of Midian travelled with payments of divination to Balak. Now Midian means contention or strife, and the Midianites are together with the Moabites here. Midianites are people who joined the Watchtower after 2001, Heshvan 10:12, when they lost their water baptism. So they never were sons of Water Father Russell. They're dry proselytes to the Watchtower. So you've got Moabites who have a valid, or had a valid water baptism, and you have Midianites who never had one, but are nonetheless Jehovah's Witnesses. And so this ridiculous request, men are sent to Balaam, and they ask him to curse Laodicea, because the Watchtower's getting scared of it. And God says to Balaam, who are these guys with you? And so Balaam said to the true God, Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, has sent to me, saying, look, the people, the ones coming from Egypt, have even covered the eye of the earth, is the precise wording. Now come, do, hollow out, curse, execrate them for me. Perhaps I'm able to fight against them, and I shall actually drive them out. This expression, the eye of the earth, is interesting, because in the literal meaning, it kind of means they've covered everywhere. But in the greater meaning, they did cover the eye of the earth. They hid the way to interpret scriptures from the congregation. The earth is the congregation. The eye of the earth is the scriptural insight of the church. And they hid it. They took the insight of the Lord's Witnesses, hid it in the ground. It's precisely what they did. But God says to Balaam, you must not go down with these guys. You must not curse the people, for they're blessed. So Balak says, go home, because, God won't let me come with you. So then Balaam says, now Balak, being a man, says, we'll send even more dignified princes and more stuff, and we'll offer Balaam an even bigger reward if he'll curse Laodicea. And Balaam wasn't averse to a nice reward. So he goes back to Jehovah, but Balaam says to the servants of Balak, if Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, silver is second New Covenant saints, gold is first New Covenant saints, I should not be able to pass beyond the order of Jehovah my God, so as to do something small or great. So he does do what God says, but his heart isn't quite right. He rather likes the idea of all these princes and the reward from Balak. So he said, I better ask Jehovah, and I'll let you know what he says. So then God came to Balaam by night and said to him, if it's to call you that the men have come, get up and go with them, but only the word that I shall speak to you is what you may speak. And Balaam got up in the morning and saddled his she-ass and went with the princes of Moab. And the anger of God began to blaze as he was going, because God only let him go because he was exasperated with him, and he wanted him to make a fool of himself. It wasn't his will that he should go, because he'd already given his opinion, don't go. God isn't a man, he doesn't change his mind because he gets a bit of external pressure in the form of bribery. Men do that. So Jehovah's angel proceeded to station himself in the road to resist him. And he's riding on his she-ass, and he had 2 attendants with him. So Balaam is the administration of Laodicea. Jehovah's angel is me. I'm the angel of Philadelphia, because I've got the sword in my hand. They don't. They don't do any Bible research. They just spy on mine. And he was riding his Shias, which is the congregation of Laodicea, and he has two attendants who are not in the Shias. They're the same level as him. They're governing body members. I mean, the president of Laodicea is a governing body member, and Balaam is a governing body of Laodicea. These attendants are governing body members of the Watchtower who are Laodiceans, or if not, they're sympathetic to Laodicea. I think they're actually Laodiceans. And so this ass, the congregation, gets to see Jehovah's angels stationed in the road with his drawn sword in his hand. Now don't forget, this ass has been fed a whole bunch of interpretations which are in fact stale showbread from our website by the governing body, seen by the angel of Laodicea, filtered by the governing body, offered to idols before they can eat it. And they don't know really where it's come from. They believe it's come from the brilliance of the governing body or some nonsense. And they suddenly find me. And when we saw that, we were astonished. We thought, oh my God, they finally realised we exist. They've seen through the lies. And so I stationed myself in the road to resist him, and Balaam, and he's riding right. And the ass got to see Jehovah's angels stationed in the road, and the ass tried to turn aside from the road. That means that the Laodiceans tried to leave the road and go into the world. They tried to leave the church, that she might go into the field. But Balaam began to strike the ass in order to turn her aside back to the road. So that got her a beating. The first idea of the Laodicean congregation, when they saw the Lord's witnesses, was basically, we want to join them. We're going to leave the Watchtower and go and join them. That got them a beating, and they changed their mind. And Jehovah's angel kept standing in the narrow way of the vineyards, with a stone wall on one side and a stone wall on the other side. This is a lovely symbolism. So here's the ass. Can't go left because of one law. A stone wall is the law of one vineyard. Vineyard is the first new covenant vineyard on one side, the law of the 3 EC, the Watchtower law, and then on the other side it's the second new covenant vineyard with the law of the 4 EC, of our water baptism. And Laodicea is walking this tightrope between these two laws, because they are actually Lord's witnesses and Jehovah's witnesses, so they have to obey both laws, and they're on this narrow and cramped path. The narrow and cramped path to everlasting life is what they're on, but it's incredibly difficult to walk because they can't decide what church they want to be in. So what does this she-ass do? She sees Jehovah's angel again with the drawn sword and thinks, don't go there, so squeezes herself against the wall and squeezes Balaam's foot against the wall. She's trying to make Balaam walk in the law of the 4 EC. Pick a law. The ass is saying you should be obeying the 4 EC law. May your foot walk in that law. Don't obey the 3 EC law. Pick a wall. That was the next thing the ass tried. What happened? The ass got another beating and went beating some more. So then Jehovah's angel passed over again, there's an interesting term, and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn aside to the left or the right. So now there's no option. She's got a cul-de-sac. There's nothing she can do. So what does she do? She lies down. And when we first saw that, we thought, okay, this ass has gone on strike. Fair enough. Why has she done that? And then we got there. She's read our Sabbath understanding. She knows that the Watchtower gave their congregation no Sabbath, and you have to pay back the Sabbath. She is saying, I'm on a Sabbath. I'm paying back the God's Sabbath. I'm not allowed to work. I've got an instruction from Jehovah. I'm not supposed to work until these Sabbaths are paid off. So I'm lying down. And that is the brilliance of the Laodicean ass, the congregation. And of course this drives the Balaam bonkers, because she is flouting his authority. So this time he beats her with his staff, saying, I've got the authority, don't listen to God, listen to me. The governing body of the Watchtower hasn't said that they should have obeyed Sabbaths. Why do you think this? But of course they understand that the Watchtower has run up a Sabbath error, because so did the Jews. And the Christians make every mistake that the Jews make that's recorded in the Bible. And then finally we have this glorious day when Jehovah opens the mouth of the ass after she's been beaten 3 times. And when you do that, when you open the mouth of an ass, what you see is 36 teeth, which are 36 days. And it takes 36 days for Balaam to understand what this ass is talking about, or accept it. And we know from the 7 times of vengeance of Cain, and from the fact that we finish our ascension on 2019 Chislev 11, that we start speaking to Balaam on 2019 ER 11. So 36 days before that was 2019 Nissan 5. That is when I uploaded this account to the web, and I wrote to all the people on my mailing list explaining what we just worked out. So the mouth of Laodicea is now open. They're speaking to Balaam, and they didn't used to do that. They're now explaining to Balaam what's going on, because Balaam couldn't see me, because there's so much subterfuge and deception going on in the watchtower. Precious few people know of my existence. The ass now knows. Balaam is now being informed by the Laodicean congregation about me. Now what the ass says is, what have I done to you so that you've beaten me these 3 times, says the translation, but the actual scripture is 3 feet, which is a weird way to express a time, but 3 steps you could say. And of course what he did is that the ass tried to leave the watchtower for the world, then tried to force the footsteps of Balaam into the law of the LWs, and then understood the Sabbath payback period and went on a strike. So that's what she did. But these 3 feet stand for 15 times, 5 toes to a foot, 3 5s are 15, and it's 15 months. So what this means is the first beating was 15 months before 2019 ER 11, when Balaam finally wakes up after his 36 days of listening to the mouth of the ass. So that would take you back to 2017 Shabbat 11, or Shabbat sometime. So in the beginning of 98, Gregorian or Shabbat 2017 was when the ass of Laodicea first saw the existence of this church. And now she's finally opened her mouth and she's telling Balaam about it. They kept it to themselves prior to Nissan 5. But once I interpreted it, they decided to tell, or maybe coincidence with it, but it was an incredible coincidence that I interpreted it on the very day that there was 36 days before that there was the first of their teeth basically in their mouth, the day that they opened their mouth. So the great thing from our standpoint is that the Laodiceans now know we exist, and they're seeing our interpretations and listening to them and obeying them when they feel that the Holy Spirit and God are with them, which is fantastic. And they're no longer silent, they're telling Balaam, wake up, this is what's going on. And Balaam does eventually get there, because this group Laodicea are pictured in John 9 as clay, mouldable clay, and although they screw up, the thing about clay is it can be remoulded, and they're the only church that is reformed. It goes false and then it's made true again, because a potter can, with the same clay, have a dishonourable use and an honourable use, says Paul. And that clay is the Laodicean clay that's put on the eyes of the watchtower. They won't listen to us. That's another thing in John 10. They don't listen to the voice of one owned by another. So certainly they don't listen to Satan's seed. But not only that, they don't listen to 2 NCs, because they're owned by me. We're strangers to the 1 NC. You know, I'm the husbandly owner of the 2 NCs. Jesus is the husbandly owner of the 1 NCs. So they don't listen to 2 NCs. They can't. They can listen to Laodiceans though. They will be the intermediaries. They will bridge the gap. They will be the Sinai Peninsula between the Egypt of the Watchtower and Arabia of Zoe. But this cheered us up no end, this ass. And then of course there's the 7 altars with 7 bulls and 7 rams on each in 3 different mountains. The bulls are priestly, the rams are saintly, kingly in fact. It's maledictions, because what God does is he turns a potential malediction into a blessing every time. And it's a 7 times potential malediction. Actually what the scriptures say later after this account is that he turned the malediction into a blessing. It was actually a request for a malediction, but nonetheless. So they prefigure 3 different churches, 3 different administrations, 3 different mountains, the Lord's Witnesses, Laodicea and the Watchtower. All 3 of us get a Gentile times lasting 7 times, and we get a alienation times, a priestly malediction lasting 7 times. And that's what all those rams and bulls being offered up on those 3 mountains are. But we were so pleased when we got this donkey understanding, when we saw why that donkey lay down, because it accepted the Sabbath payback period then we realised we finally got through to someone, and that was an amazing day for us. And we realised it on the very day that they opened their mouth. Thank you.